Baker Mayfield won't be heading to Seattle. What does that mean for the Seahawks quarterback situation heading into the 2022 season? Me and a special guest host will be breaking the situation down on our latest installment of Locked On Seahawks.
You are Locked On Seahawks, your daily Seattle Seahawks podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's happening, 12? This is Corbin Smith, your host for Locked On Seahawks. I've got a special guest host. It's been about a year since the last time I had my mom, Trina Chapman-Smith, come on the show. She's a Dolphins fan. Don't hold that against her, but she does watch a ton of football, and so she knows all the quarterbacks in the league, most of the running backs, defensive players that I'm starting to reach a little bit. No, but anyway, we're going to be doing what we did a year ago on this show when we looked at all the quarterbacks that are on the Seahawks' upcoming schedule. We're going to be ranking them and kind of throwing a little bit of a curveball into this year's festivities. We're going to be putting Seattle's expected quarterbacks into the mix. Where do they compare against the rest of the quarterbacks that are on the Seahawks schedule? But before we get to that, for our lead story here on Locked On Seahawks, speaking of quarterbacks, Baker Mayfield, previously with the Cleveland Browns. My mother, being from Indiana, pays closer attention to the Browns than what many people do. And Baker Mayfield had a solid but not great first 4 seasons in the NFL. Former number 1 overall pick for the Browns. Had a pretty disappointing year last year, was really good in 2020, led Cleveland to the playoffs. There's been a lot of speculation that he was going to end up with the Seattle Seahawks. It turns out that will not be the case. All of that speculation can officially shut up because he is going to the Carolina Panthers in exchange for a conditional 5th-round pick, and they're going to be paying around $5 million of his $18.5 million. So Cleveland is going to be eating most of that money. That's what everybody expected Seattle was going to have to do to make this trade happen. And apparently the Seahawks were not interested in even doing that. Based on what I was told, they certainly did not want to give up a 5th-round pick. Ultimately, that makes it look like he really was not a quarterback of great interest for them.
And I'm shocked because I guess we'll talk about this a lot more later, but I don't think Drew Locke and Gino Smith, either one of them, are probably better than Baker Mayfield. And it seems like Charlotte got him on the cheap, in my opinion. I don't know what you feel, but
I think it's a fair
draft pick and picking up some salary. I don't know. What's $5 million to the NFL?
Well, the Seahawks also have a lot more cap space than that. So they're around 16.5, 17 million in cap space the last time I looked. So the Seahawks decided not to make this move. There's been a lot of different reports out there. Justina Anderson, previously of ESPN, now CBS Sports, was saying that the Seahawks had great interest in Mayfield. Ian Rappaport from NFL Network a couple of days ago said there really wasn't that much interest in him. And so it looks like that ultimately was the case. And maybe Seattle had a lot of interest, but they weren't willing to pay what Carolina was.
Had Charlotte been in the mix? I mean, had Charlotte been a consideration?
Yeah,
the Panthers were in on it from the beginning.
The Panthers were in on this. They were the other team that needed a quarterback. Sam
Darnold.
Darnold.
With their stud muffin.
Yeah, Sam Darnold and Matt Corral, who they drafted in the 3rd round. So that's the difference. They did draft a quarterback, which the Seattle Seahawks surprisingly did not. There was a lot of whispering about Malik Willis. Sam Howell, coming out of North Carolina, was still available going into the 5th round. Seattle did not pick him. He ended up with the Commanders. He's going to back up Carson Wentz. But now the big question is, did the Seahawks make the right move here? And I've kind of voiced my opinion on this maybe 9 or 10 episodes so far of Locked On Seahawks. This has been a huge talking point, especially in the post-Russell Wilson era, kickstarting that here in 2022. I would agree with you. I think Mayfield is the better quarterback compared to Gino Smith and Drew Locke. I don't know how much he would have elevated the ceiling of this football team, though. Maybe they end up being an 8 or 9 win team. Maybe he adds 2 wins to the equation. I think he is better than those two. But I'm not going to reach and say that he's suddenly going to come in and be the second coming of Drew Brees and turn the Seahawks into the New Orleans Saints and get into the Super Bowl within a couple years.
He would have had a new system to learn in a very short period of time. You know, his leadership to me has been fairly unquestioned most of the time, but his decision-making, I guess we'll see what Locke or Smith can do.
My opinion is there's a lot of similarities between Locke and Mayfield in that sense. They both kind of have a gunslinger mentality. But Mayfield has actually been a productive starter in the NFL. Drew Locke, aside from going 4-1 his rookie year, has not been and didn't even beat out Teddy Bridgewater last year. The Seahawks seem excited about him. They seem excited about Gino Smith as well. But if Baker Mayfield goes to Carolina and lights it up, the Panthers have a lot of talent. They also have a couple really good receivers. If Mayfield goes to Carolina and lights it up and Seattle goes into the season with either Locke or Smith as a quarterback and neither one of them gets the job done and they end up having a top 3, top 4 pick, you look at it 2 ways. The fans might be excited from one perspective because the quarterback class coming in next year is really good, or at least at this point looks like it's going to be good. C.J. Stroud from Ohio State being one of those guys, Bryce Young from Alabama, Will Levis from Kentucky. There's some really good quarterbacks in this class.
Versus this year, I think most people agree this was a down year for
only one
QBs entering the league.
Only one quarterback picked in the first 3 rounds.
Yeah,
and the Seahawks did not pick a quarterback. So they clearly did not view this as a class where they could find their next franchise guy. Maybe they still think Drew Locke can be that player. He's only 25 years old. We're going to have more time to talk about where Drew Locke and Gino Smith fit into this quarterback hierarchy in the NFL, at least looking at the Seahawks schedule here momentarily. But there's no question that if Mayfield goes to Carolina and does well and Seattle's quarterbacks struggle, that there's going to be a lot of people that are looking back in hindsight and wondering why didn't the Seahawks make this move when all they had to give up was a conditional 5th and maybe pay 30% of his salary for 2022. He's only 27 years old. If he goes to Carolina and struggles or he loses the job to Sam Darnold, there are some people speculating that he has not won this job just by being acquired by the Panthers. So maybe Sam Darnold is their starter. But either way, this is going to be a storyline that's going to be monitored a lot.
I think a bigger storyline is what are the Browns going to do? It's unreal to me that with all the uncertainty and speculation with Deshaun Watson's situation, and what you said they have Jacoby Brissett, who just left my team, and he was underwhelming last year.
That's a nice way to put it.
He has lost what ability and skill set I think he had. So are the Browns going to, if Watson is unavailable all year, is this the guy? Cleveland, come on. I mean, I know this isn't a Browns show, but that's the bigger question.
This will be my finishing note before we go into our quarterback hierarchy here. We look at the Seahawks schedule. I am grateful that the Seattle Seahawks did not pull the trigger and that Deshaun Watson did not want to play in Seattle. Given where things stand right now, they certainly had interest. I think there were a number of teams that were, because Deshaun Watson is a very talented quarterback. He's a top 5 caliber quarterback when he's got his head on straight, but it doesn't look like he may play this year. So Cleveland's rolling the dice here now. They truly are by moving on from Baker Mayfield. He's heading to the Panthers, not the Seahawks, which means it's Gino Smith or Drew Locke season for the Seattles, and maybe Jimmy Garoppolo season too. We'll talk about that as well coming up soon. My mother and I are going to be looking
I might be their next quarterback. No, just kidding.
You might be. The Seahawks and all the other quarterbacks they're going to be facing. We're going to be ranking the 15 quarterback groups heading into this 2022 season, Seattle, as well as the 14 opponents that they will be facing this season. We're going to be breaking that down here in a moment. From the people who invented healthy and tasty comes the latest gift to your taste buds. You've probably tried the amazing Coconut Brownie Chunk Built Bar, but guess what? Your friends at Built have given Coconut Brownie Chunk the Puffs treatment. That's right, the Coconut Brownie Chunk Built Bar. Flavor you love in a deliciously chewy marshmallow covered in 100% real chocolate. It's like a fluffy cloud of coconut brownie goodness. But stop drooling and listen. They are also good for you. Low calorie, low sugar, high protein, and all delicious. Coconut Brownie Chunk Puffs are only here for a limited time. Go to Built.com now to make sure you don't miss out. They're going fast because they taste amazing. All Built Bars are made with collagen protein, which your body absorbs more efficiently and provides tons of health benefits. Eat something that tastes good and is good for you. Delicious coconut, rich, sweet brownie, creamy marshmallow. Stop fantasizing. Get to Built.com to order your box of Coconut Brownie Chunk Built Puffs right now. Go to Built.com, use the promo code LOCK15 and get 15% off your order. Again, that's LOCK15 at Built.com to get 50% off your next order. Welcome back to the Locked On Seahawks podcast. I'm your host, Corbin Smith. Joining me for this special edition Thursday episode, my mother in crime, Trina Chapman-Smith. Rob Rang is my co-host in crime. My mother in crime is joining the show today.
I've never been called that before. That's awesome.
So anyway, we're going to be diving into the quarterbacks. As always, we greatly appreciate you making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. Seattle's going to be playing against their obvious NFC West foes. They're going to be facing the AFC West. They've got one game against the New York Jets with that 17th extra game. They're playing the entire NFC South. They got a few other games scattered in there. 14 different opponents. We started this tradition a year ago. I think we're going to keep it. Here at the Lake House in Missouri, we are going to be going through all of the quarterbacks the Seahawks are going to be facing this year. And this year we're throwing a wrinkle in because the Seahawks are going to have a new quarterback. We're including them in our rankings as well. We're going to be looking at all 15 quarterback groups. Without further ado, let's start at the tail end here. And some of you may be thinking, oh, goodness, we're starting right with the Seahawks. But I am not starting with the Seahawks at number 15 with Drew Locke and Gino Smith. I'm going with maybe one of the bigger wild cards in terms of uncertainty, the Atlanta Falcons. Marcus Mariota, who played at the University of Oregon, a lot of Pacific Northwest ties, very athletic quarterback, but he hasn't started for a couple of years, struggled during his time with the Tennessee Titans. I think that him or Desmond Ridder, the third-round pick out of Cincinnati, maybe Ridder ends up winning that job. He's impressed them during their offseason program, but he's a rookie, a third-round pick, not a great quarterback class, at least from the outside looking in. I look at this group, especially with the receivers that they're going to be throwing to. Yeah. No Julio Jones. They've gotten rid of a couple other receivers. They just don't have much skill talent around them, aside from Kyle Pitts, who I think is a dynamic playmaker. But otherwise, they don't have a lot of weapons.
But they're going to double team or use schemes to make him unavailable, probably. Exactly.
I have them dead last, and this wasn't difficult for me. To me, they are the tail.
And I have them also at 15. And, I thought Mariota played admirably last year when he came in
for the Raiders. Yeah,
for the Raiders. I think he's a guy you can count on. I've seen Ridder play a little. You watch a lot more college football than I do, but I still think they're the bottom feeders because of the lack of marquee players around them.
Yeah, Atlanta truly is. I think they are one of the contenders for the number 1 overall pick. So I've got them at the tail end there. If Ridder ends up being good, then that changes things. We could revisit this in the middle of the season. Atlanta might be much higher on this list, but certainly that is a team with the lack of talent there, the state that they are in rebuilding. It seems like that is an underwhelming quarterback group. And number 14, I'm still not quite getting to our Seahawks quarterbacks here. Going to go with a quarterback that has a chance maybe to blow up in his 4th season because of his new head coach. Brian Daboll is now with the New York Giants. Daniel Jones has had flashes. I remember watching the game against Tom Brady a few years ago, but he was pitting, strike for strike with him until the 4th quarter, and then the turnovers returned. And that has been the big issue. He's had poor coaching. There's been inconsistency with the weapons around him. There's a lot of ifs with Daniel Jones, but he's still a young player. And if Brian Daboll, the quarterback whisperer, ends up coming in and doing what he did with Josh Allen, maybe Daniel Jones with a better supporting cast around him will end up breaking through in year 4. I'm not sold, though. That's why I've got him at number 14.
And I admit, he's a player I've seen play very little. I think he's cerebral. Exactly, I think that's his biggest gift. Yeah. But I don't think there's enough there. I have him at 14 also. So far we're same with that. But
next up on my list, he could blow up. I like Brian Daboll.
But I don't expect that.
Now, next on my list, I think this is where you and I maybe start to divert a little bit here. Number 13, I think it's time to bust out the Seahawks here because it's not an ideal situation from the outside looking in. You have 2 veteran quarterbacks in Gino Smith and Drew Locke who are failed former starters as second-round picks. Smith with the Jets much longer ago than Drew Locke, who just lost the starting job last year to Teddy Bridgewater. And they've both shown flashes. Gino Smith played well at times for the New York Jets on a really bad team with poor coaching. Yeah. And Drew Locke went 4-1 as a rookie, as a starter. And there were moments his second year they played well. But you had too many moments where poor decisions were made. And he tried to throw the ball in double and triple coverage, poor decision-making. Until that gets fixed, it's hard to buy into that. And so, again, just like the Falcons, this is kind of a wild card. If one of those guys really blows up in Shane Waldron's offense and doesn't turn the ball over, is able to facilitate the offense with the weapons that they have, much better weapons than the Atlanta Falcons do, then maybe we revisit this list. Seattle will be up a few slots. But right now, I think this is the fair spot to put them because it's not a good quarterback situation.
And your understanding of their dynamic together, how well they're going to get along. Are these guys that if one clearly outplays the other guy's going to be supportive, or is Seattle going to have some discord in their ranks because these two are there's no real leader in the huddle. So that'll be
well. That's what's interesting about this. And since this is the Seahawks podcast, we'll talk a little bit more about the Seahawks because that to me is where Gino Smith right now has the advantage. He knows the offense, and he also has locker room backing. Not that Drew Locke doesn't. If you saw the U.S. Open tweet the other day where they were basically bashing that Seahawks fan saying, you got a lot of gumption to talk up about, watching 17 games of Drew Locke play quarterback, and Drew Locke took this in stride. But DK Metcalf has come to his defense on social media, and certainly the Seahawks have his backing. But I think Geno Smith in the locker room right now has the edge because he's been in that locker room. He played well in limited action last year. So we'll see what happens. Right now, I'm still leaning towards Geno Smith, but this truly is a 50-50 quarterback battle going into training camp later this month. Next on our list, going to number 12. I think you and I have slightly different answers on this one. I'm staying in the NFC West with another player that has a lot of upside, but he's only played a handful of snaps. And he was shaky last year coming out of North Dakota State. That's Trey Lance. I expect that he's going to be the starter, not Jimmy Garoppolo. They're going to give it to him as the number 3 pick. He needs to play. So I anticipate with his athleticism, his arm strength, that we're going to potentially see a big leap from him this year. But he could also really struggle in his first year as a starter. So I've got him at number 12 on my list based on what I think is potential. He could be much higher in this list this time next year. Yeah. He could be lower, too, if he really struggles.
Yeah. He seemed very exciting as a college player.
Yes.
But isn't he the guy that didn't play at all in the COVID season?
Yeah.
North Dakota State didn't have a schedule. So it's very hard to predict, I feel. And I have them at 11, though, whichever one, because I actually had Smith and Locke at that two-headed monster at 12. 13, I had what I call the trifecta down in New Orleans. And Corbin he's in you're definitely in a different realm with this one, but if is it Jameis Winston? Is it the old vet Andy Dalton? Is it Taysom Hill with his unusual skill set? Is there new coach? And I admit I don't remember who that is.
Dennis Allen.
Is he going to flip these guys around like he's playing cards and rotate them in different settings? Is it going to be that old saying, if you don't have one quarterback, you don't have any? I just don't know. I'm not sold that this trio is any better than 13th in this group.
Yeah, so, I will get to the Saints at some point. I have a little different.
He's higher on it than I am, for sure.
I'll have different viewpoint on that one, but certainly I can understand Winston coming off a torn ACL. And
exactly.
Hill hasn't proven he can be an NFL.
And Jameis has never really completely, to me, shown I've got this team. And they trust me.
And Andy Dalton hasn't been great for hasn't been good.
No, and I think Andy Dalton has the huddle. I think he gets the locker room.
But
he's respected, but the talent level's not the same.
Yeah. That's certainly an interesting one. We'll get to the Saints here in a moment. But again, I've got at number 12, the 49ers. You've got the Seahawks quarterbacks there. And at number 11, I'm going with a Wilson, but it's not the one that played for the Seattle Seahawks. That would be way too low for Russell Wilson. But Zach Wilson for the New York Jets. And I will put this caveat with this. I think Zach Wilson could be much higher on this list because the New York Jets have done a great job supporting talent around him. And I think that last year he didn't play to his talent level. This is a really talented player. I loved what I saw from him at BYU. He plays with moxie. He could fall flat on his face, but I think the Jets are going in the right direction. And I think with that, the quarterback, the young QB, is going to follow suit. But based on the other quarterbacks in this list and what we've seen from him so far, I think number 11 is a pretty safe spot for him right now. But with his upside, could be much higher.
And I have him at 9, just because I see the upside. I'm a Dolphins fan. They play the Jets twice every year. Yeah. I've seen this guy a little bit more, and you're right. There are flashes of brilliance there. Which guy is he going to be? He's going to be good enough because he's got a great sporting cast. But he also is in a tough division.
Yes.
So we'll see how that plays out.
Now, number 10 on my list, I'm going to go with somebody Seahawks fans know really well. And there might be some of you listening thinking, man, you haven't ranked that high. But Jared Goff is one of those enigmas of the quarterback position that I don't think he's elite. I don't even think he's great. But
he's not terrible.
The Detroit Lions last year, in my opinion, were one of the more competitive teams in the second half of the year. Seattle blew them out late in the season, but Goff did not play in that game. And he has always played well against the Seahawks. So I'm also considering that here.
I had him at 10 also.
Yeah, I feel the same way. I think you put a good team around him. We saw it in LA. He can win. He led them to a Super Bowl. I think Detroit is an ascending team as well. I really like Campbell as their head coach. I think they're good at putting good pieces around him. He's got a really good receiver.
They have an intense fan base that has supported them even through some terrible times. And he could
I
be the
think
guy
he's
for a long time
he's a
there.
better quarterback than most people give him credit for. But I'm also not going to say, oh, he's top 10. He's certainly not.
Right.
But I think number 10 is a good spot for him. I think we've seen what he is and what he isn't. You can win with Jared Goff. I would expect they're going to be looking other directions at quarterback at some point. But for now, they have a good young roster.
Well, wasn't he the one who was right neck and neck in the draft with Josh Rosen? And where's Josh Rosen now?
Well, Goff is a few years earlier, but you could look at them and see some similarities in skill set, but Goff ended up making things work with the Rams. Yeah. Rosen has been an absolute disaster in the end, and you would know he played for the Dolphins.
Yeah, yes, exactly.
All right, number 9 here on the list. This is where you and I think this is our biggest discrepancy. You've already listed the New Orleans Saints. I have them at number 9 because I have more faith in Jameis Winston than what you do. Jameis Winston, unlike most of the other players that we've already talked about here, actually, I don't think there's another guy on this list that has been a Pro Bowler. Jameis Winston has been. And even though I don't think he's ever played as well as people thought he would as the number 1 overall pick coming out of Florida State, I think he's still a very solid player. The Saints were on the verge of winning that division before he tore his ACL last year. And even with Dennis Allen as the coach, no Sean Payton, I still think Jameis Winston has enough weapons there. They added Olave, the receiver out of Ohio State, for him to throw to. Yeah. So I don't think this is a competition. I think Jameis Winston is the guy, and I like him there at spot number 9.
But you're right. They're an A-list franchise. If he gets it together, you could be right. They're always dangerous, I think. Yeah.
And then you had at number 9.
I had Zach Wilson.
Zach Wilson. Okay.
We already talked about him.
Wrapping up the first half of our list here now at number 8. This was actually earlier today at this spot. I had Winston at number 8. And then the Carolina Panthers decided to trade for Baker Mayfield, as we mentioned earlier in the show.
And I have Baker at 8 also.
Yeah, I think Mayfield, this is a perfect spot for him. He's not elite, not necessarily great, but if he plays like he did 2 years ago, then I think he certainly could be in this discussion.
And I think this could be a guy that has a ring on his finger someday. I've always liked him. I think he has a lot to prove. But he has some talent to prove it.
He's going to have a bigger chip on his shoulder than what he has had
anywhere else
at any point. And he's already had a huge chip on his shoulder. Was a walk-on at Texas Tech, then goes to Oklahoma, wins the Heisman. So I like Baker Mayfield. I'm not going to say that I'm a huge fan of him. He wasn't my favorite quarterback in that class. In fact, Lamar Jackson was my favorite in that draft class. And I liked Josh Allen, but I was concerned about him coming from Wyoming and the accuracy, but I saw the physical tools. He has been way better than
I remember we disagree. I liked Allen a lot. I thought Wyoming, this guy's going to be great.
Yeah.
And Lamar Jackson, I thought, come on. There have been so many Lamar
So
Jacksons
we both ended up being right.
That flamed out, but we both, we were, exactly.
And I think both of us felt the same way in Baker Mayfield. I didn't necessarily think he was number 1 overall pick material, but nonetheless, I like him in Carolina. He's got DJ Moore to throw to. Christian McCaffrey, if he's healthy, is a dangerous receiving running back.
So you don't think McCaffrey's going anywhere?
I don't.
Yet?
No,
okay.
I don't.
Okay.
I think Carolina is going to get – Matt Rule's on the hot seat. They're going to be trying to keep as many of their star players as they can. Yeah. So I think Mayfield is the starter there, not Sam Darnold. I got him at number 8. All right, getting to our next half of the list here. This is considered the upper half. I'm going to start with our other NFC West rival here coming in at number 7, Arizona Cardinals, Kyler Murray. When Murray is at his best, he's top 3 on this list. He can do things that very few quarterbacks can do. He's a pinball back there. He's got a lot of Russell Wilson talent. The problem that I have with him, and we've seen a little bit with the contract stuff that's come out, him deleting social media stuff, which is now the new thing to do. But you saw the playoff game against the Rams. I question his leadership skills.
Yeah, decision-making has to get better. But I agree. He's fabulous when he's on. But it's not consistent
there doesn't seem to be a mid-ground with Kyler Murray. He is either a top 5 quarterback or he is a bottom 10. And when he's playing at his worst, he is not a good quarterback. There is not a mid-ground with him. But you see early on in the season last year that it looked like he could be the MVP. He was playing at that level. So I've got him there squarely at 7.
Me too.
I think that he's a phenomenal talent. The question is he going to be able to transcend the coach that they have there? Because I'm not a big fan of Cliff Kingsbury. I think he's an overrated coach. I'm surprised they extended him.
But my gosh, the weapons he has there.
Oh, yeah.
He's got
Hollywood
receivers
Brown now. Yeah.
And my little sweet guy, Rondale Moore from Purdue, who I think is still going to surprise people. He just has a lot to throw at.
Yeah. Hopkins will be back after 6 games. He's suspended, but they have tons of weapons.
Yeah.
So Kyler Murray doesn't have an excuse on that front.
No,
He's got tons of people to throw to.
None whatsoever.
Dynamic talent. I think 7's about the right fit for him. I think that he's more talented than the guy that I've got at number 6 from the Las Vegas Raiders, Derek Carr. I love the receivers. He's getting back with Devontae Adams, who he played with at Fresno State. They put up record numbers. And I think that he is an overlooked quarterback. I don't want to say he's elite because I don't think he's in that class, but I would put him top 10 potentially. And I think the numbers he put up last year, he's got Darren Waller to go with Devontae Adams. Hunter Renfrow is a fantastic slot receiver. They've got a good running game. They've got a solid offensive line. And I think Carr still has a lot to prove. He feels like he's the underdog.
And I think he absolutely lacks no confidence. I think he is perhaps the most confident guy of all of the players we're talking about today who we haven't even gotten to yet. I mean, I think he thinks he can do it all. He thinks he can do what they need him to do.
Yep.
And he's going to.
And Josh McDaniels is now his coach.
And that's a guy that can help him reach his potential, I think. I don't like him a lot, but I think he's got this. I think it's good marriage.
Yeah. I think Carr is probably the worst quarterback in the AFC West right now by a very slim margin, but that is not an insult because that division is absolutely loaded. And I think this is where you and I disagreed a little bit.
Well, because I have
Russell Wilson. I have Russell Wilson at number 5.
I have them flipped. I have them exactly flipped. So we're splitting hairs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To me, the difference here is Russell Wilson's a little bit better in terms of when he is at his best. I think that his peaks are still a little better than what Derek Carr is going to give you.
Well, and he has a ring. He has experience.
He also has very good young receivers in Denver too.
Yeah.
That I think he's got not maybe as good of a supporting cast, but it's a pretty darn good one.
Yeah.
In Denver, he's got an offensive head coach. Seahawks fans obviously know Russell Wilson really well. So I've got him at number 5 and Carr at number 6. You flip-flop with me.
Yeah, like I said, we're
splitting hairs there. I think it's a close margin. Close. All 4 of those quarterbacks, the AFC West, are really, really good. At number 4, I'm going to go with the GOAT, Tom Brady, at number 4. And I was torn on this one because how dare you put the GOAT at number 4 on a list like this? But Tom Brady is getting older. And this does not mean that I think that he's a bad quarterback now. I still think he's a very good quarterback. I just don't think he's as good as the 3 guys in front of him. And 2 of those guys are younger quarterbacks that still have room to get better once we get to those guys on the list. Tom Brady's still going to be a very difficult opponent for the Seahawks, still a very good quarterback. But no Rob Gronkowski. They've had some changes in the receiving core. So I do have some question marks a little bit with Tampa Bay, but I still think that's going to be
one of the better teams. And let's face it, he stepped away from the game completely for a couple months. So is his mind exactly in it like it's been for the last 20-something years? That's where I'm questioning. I have Matthew Stafford at 4, right? You have Stafford at 3.
So I have Stafford at 3, so we flip-flop.
But I think Matthew Stafford proved everything he had to prove this last season. Underrated for years and a great situation, and look what happened.
I think the reason I flip-flop those 2, Stafford is not necessarily a young quarterback, but he's much younger than Tom Brady. And I look at the weapons. They just went out. Yeah, they lost Woods, but they didn't have Woods when they won the Super Bowl last year. You're still going to have Cooper Kupp, who's arguably the best receiver in the NFL, had the Triple Crown last year. You're playing in Sean McVay's offense, and that was a perfect marriage with those 2.
You have a defense that
you
is
had an Allen
unbelievable.
Robinson, who I think has never had a good quarterback. You put him with Matthew Stafford, he's going to blow up. They've got a couple other good receivers. They've got 2 good tight ends. So I think the scheme fit, the talent around him. That is why I have him in front of Tom Brady. And I think you and I, number 2 and number 1, this is scary. The Seahawks are playing the entire AFC West. And this just puts in perspective how good that division is.
No doubt.
Just looking at the quarterbacks, because Russell Wilson in a lot of divisions would probably be the best quarterback. There are several divisions that he would be the best. I still think if he's in the NFC West, you could make the argument with him and Matthew Stafford.
Yeah, agreed.
I would pick Stafford over, but he's 3rd best, and I don't think it's that close, honestly. I think Justin Herbert, and it's funny because I was not a big fan of him coming out of Oregon.
I was.
She was. And she still rubs in my face.
And Miami, you still should have taken him.
My co-host in crime, Rob Rang, was also a huge fan of Justin Herbert. So both of you, eat it. Anyway.
Bow to us.
Anyway, Herbert, I have grown to really respect his game. You see what he's done his first 2 years. The Chargers have not gotten in the playoffs, but it hasn't been his fault. This kid has just gone out and he's made plays with his arm, with his legs. He's got moxie. His teammates love him. And he's just an interesting guy on top of it. So I've got Justin Herbert at number 2 on my list.
So do I.
And I think that there's a really good chance that he has an all-pro caliber season for the Chargers. They've got tons of weapons around him.
MVP candidate for sure, I think.
But the MVP favorite is at number 1.
That's the problem for him in this ranking.
Well, Josh Allen for the Bills would maybe be my MVP favorite, but the co-MVP favorite, it's got to be Patrick Mahomes.
And we're sitting here in Kansas City Chief country right now. Yeah. So he is the man.
His ability to make throws off platform, downfield, and I know Tyreek Hill's no longer there, but he feels like one of those quarterbacks where you could go out and get a Michelin man and put him at receiver.
He just figures it out.
And he'll be an all-pro.
Yeah.
And Andy Reid's your offensive coordinator. I know that he's the head coach, but he's still the coordinator. He's running his offense.
And Andy Reid entrusts him to do whatever Patrick Mahomes does, which is things that no one else can do.
Now, I still hold it against him. He puts ketchup on his steak, but that's not going to stop him from being number 1 on our list here.
That seems like a sin in this part of the country. But we're not talking barbecue here. So
anyway, Mahomes, big-time talent. I think Josh Allen now has made this a very interesting case. Who's the best young quarterback in the NFL? Maybe you can throw Herbert in there, but Mahomes has a ring already. He's gotten to 2 Super Bowls, nearly got to another one last year. And I think they're going to put other receivers around him. He's going to be just fine. He's a transcendent quarterback that really fits today's modern NFL. That is going to be a rough game before Christmas in Kansas City. Playing at Arrowhead for the Seahawks. To me, Herbert's a great treat. Herbert's a great player, an ascending talent that maybe would be number 1 on this list in a different year. But right now, this is Patrick Mahomes' time. And to me, he's the best quarterback of this group.
He's might be the best player in the NFL, period. So
he has.
It's hard to not give him the crown in this list.
So really, what this paints a picture for is that the Seahawks, their quarterback situation is not ideal, but it doesn't take a rocket scientist to know that.
But we looked at this. We looked at this over, and we thought half of these quarterbacks are excellent, and half of them are questionable. So. That if you're thinking the QB carries the day for a lot of teams,
Seattle could be in good shape.
Yeah.
They've got a lot of opponents that have some quarterback questions, and certainly that made this ranking an interesting one to look at. But nonetheless, who's under center for Seattle, at least at this point? Maybe Drew Locke finds it with Shane Waldron, and maybe he clicks. He's got physical tools. Or maybe Gino Smith is one of those late bloomers that is in the right offense for him with good weapons. He and DK Metcalf really hit it off last year. Maybe he ends up being the guy, and Seattle wins a lot more games than anticipated. So that's what makes all of this preseason stuff so much fun is, we think we know what's going to happen, but
we're clueless.
There's always a lot of real big surprises in the NFL, and there's teams that they exceed expectations. There's teams that don't touch expectations. 12s are hoping the Seahawks are going to be one of those teams that everybody's overlooking post-Russell Wilson era, and doesn't matter who's under center. They're going to find ways to be competitive and win more games than expected. We'll see what happens. As always, 12s, greatly appreciate you listening to Locked On Seahawks 5 days a week. You can follow me on Twitter at Corbin Smith NFL. You will not be following this doctor on Twitter, Twitterless Trina. You will be following her. But anyway, we will have her back on at some point. Maybe we'll have some medical updates during the season from the doctor as well. I greatly appreciate her jumping on. Coming up on tomorrow's Blue Friday episode, I'm going to be answering your questions in our listener mailbag segment, and I'm going to be playing a game with Nick Lee. We're really looking forward to it as we get closer to training camp. Going to be making some predictions on what some of Seattle's players are going to accomplish in 2022. Really looking forward to it. Enjoy the rest of your Thursday. Thanks for listening. Go Hawks.